Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every life when the familiar becomes too small, when the old identity you've worn like a second skin begins to tighten, and when the stories you've told yourself no longer match the future you desire. This moment is your invitation to step beyond who you have been and into who you are capable of becoming. We often live each day through the lens of yesterday. We wake up, recall our problems, remember our limitations, and with remarkable consistency, we create the same experience because we are thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and performing the same actions. But hear this truth: you are not hardwired. You are hard willed. Your brain, your body, your emotions, your habits, they are not permanent. They are patterns. And what can be created can be uncreated. What has been practiced can be replaced. If you truly want to break the habit of being yourself, you must begin by observing yourself, not with judgment, not with shame. Awareness is the first step toward liberation. When you become conscious of the thoughts that drain you, the emotions that limit you, and the behaviors that sabotage your growth, you reclaim the power to choose something new. Choice is where transformation begins. Imagine for a moment the version of you that exists beyond your fears, beyond your past, beyond your predictable routines. Who is that person? How do they think? How do they move through the world? How do they love, contribute, create, and live? Now understand this: your future self is not waiting for time. Your future self is waiting for your decision. To start fresh is not to destroy your past, but to rise above it. Start fresh is to choose a new thought, even when the old one demands your attention. To start fresh is to act as the person you wish to become, not the one you have always been. When you emotionally embrace the future before it arrives, when you feel gratitude, worthiness, expansion, joy, your body begins to believe that a new life is already happening. And biology responds, neural pathways rewire, chemistry shifts, identity softens, possibility expands. You begin to inhabit the very self you once only imagined. Today, I invite you to step beyond repetition and enter creation, to replace familiar suffering with unfamiliar freedom, to stop explaining your limitations and start exploring your potential. Your future pull you forward with more power than your past ever held over you. Break the habit of being who you were. Start fresh with who you decide to be. Your future is not something you wait for. Your future is something you practice. Every person reaches a moment in life when the weight of who they have been becomes too heavy to carry forward. It's not a dramatic event, it's a quiet realization, a subtle awareness that the thoughts you keep thinking, the emotions you keep feeling, actions you keep repeating no longer reflect the life you want to live. You sense, perhaps for the first time, that the identity you've been wearing was never the limit of who you truly are. This moment is not a crisis, it is an awakening. Recognition that you are more than your conditioning, more than your past, and more than the patterns that have shaped your personality. You start to wonder what would happen if you stopped living automatically and began living intentionally. What would happen if you stopped reacting to life and started creating it? What would happen if you broke the habit of being yourself, not to escape who you are, but to evolve into who you were always capable of becoming? This journey requires awareness, courage, willingness to step into the unknown. It demands that you challenge old beliefs, rewrite emotional patterns, and embody a new way of being before the evidence of change shows up in your external world. It is a journey of clarity, expansion, deep inner transformation. And through this script, you are invited to explore that journey fully, one keynote at a time, discovering how to liberate yourself from the familiar past and step boldly into a future you consciously create. Awareness is the birthplace of transformation, the silent doorway through which every new version of yourself must pass. Before you can break the habit of being who you have always been, you must first recognize the patterns that have shaped you. People move through life in a state of unconscious repetition, responding to circumstances with the same thoughts, the same emotions, and the same behaviors as if their past has taken control of the present moment. What they don't realize is that they are not making choices. Rather, their habits are choosing for them. Awareness interrupts this cycle. It shines a light on the thoughts that run automatically in the background. The emotional reactions that feel justified but keep you stuck, and the behaviors that appear harmless but slowly erode your potential. Once you begin observing yourself, you reclaim the power to decide who you want to be in each moment. Awareness is not about condemnation or self criticism. In fact, those emotional states lower your capacity for change. True awareness is neutral, it does not fight your habits or resist them. Instead, it observes them with clarity and curiosity. Imagine for a moment stepping outside yourself and watching your day unfold as though you were witnessing someone else's life. You would notice how quickly you wake up and reconnect with old problems. You would see how your body tightens in familiar stress, how your mind rehearses predictable narratives, and how your choices are often dictated by yesterday's emotions rather than today's intentions. When you witness this without getting entangled in it, something remarkable happens. The unconscious becomes conscious. Becomes changeable. Awareness liberates you from the illusion that your identity is fixed. You were not born with your fears, your limitations, your patterns, or your self-doubt. These were practiced into existence. They were rehearsed until they felt natural. But what feels natural is not always what is true. Awareness allows you to challenge the thoughts that tell you you're not enough, the emotions that keep you anchored to old memories, behaviors that prevent you from stepping into the life you desire. To be aware is to create space between stimulus and response, between emotion and action, between who you have been and who you choose to become. In this space, you begin to see that every thought you think is a choice. Every feeling you nurture is an outcome. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Without awareness, these votes are cast unconsciously, often reinforcing the very identity you're trying to outgrow. With awareness, you become the one casting the votes deliberately. You start recognizing when your mind tries to pull you back into old stories. You notice when familiar emotions try to seduce you into repeating the past. And instead of following them blindly, you pause, you observe, you choose differently. Awareness is a powerful disruptor. Down the habitual momentum of your old self and invites you to respond from a higher level of consciousness. When you become aware of your internal world, you stop blaming your external world. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, but as the creator of your destiny. The moment you observe a limiting thought, you weaken its influence. The moment you acknowledge an old emotional pattern, you interrupt its cycle. Moment you witness a behavior that doesn't align with your future, you gain the ability to replace it with one that does. Awareness liberates because it reveals the truth. You are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you are not your habits. You are the awareness behind them, the observer who can reshape them, the consciousness capable of rewriting the script of your life. You aren't confined by biology, fate, or the story you've told yourself about who you are. You are not trapped by a fixed personality, an inherited emotional set point, or an unchangeable destiny. What truly shapes your life is not a rigid wiring, but the patterns you rehearse every day, patterns of thought, patterns of emotion, and patterns of action. Patterns repeated often enough solidify into what feels like you. But they are not permanent structures. They are simply familiar ones. And the familiar is powerful, not because it is true, but because it is practiced. Human beings often underestimate the degree to which repetition shapes identity. A person who wakes up stressed every morning does not wake up that way because stress is part of their genetic blueprint. They wake up stressed because they have practiced stress. A person who constantly doubts themselves is not inherently insecure. They have simply memorized insecurity. When a thought is repeated long enough, the brain wires it in. When an emotion is revisited consistently, the body conditions itself to expect it. When a behavior is performed frequently, the nervous system anticipates it before you even consciously choose it. None of this is destiny. It is familiarity. And familiarity is programmable. Standing that you are pattern driven is the first step toward reclaiming your personal power. If repeated thoughts can create limiting beliefs, then repeated new thoughts can dissolve them. If emotions can be memorized from the past, elevated emotions can be rehearsed into the future. If behaviors can become automatic through practice, then empowering behaviors can replace them through intention. You are far more adaptable than you've ever been told. Your brain is not a machine locked into place. It is a living, continually changing organ designed to rewire itself according to your focus and experience. Your identity is not a fixed monument, but a fluid landscape shaped by what you consistently choose. The challenge is that most people don't realize they are running old patterns. They confuse predictability with personality. They say, "This is just who I am," when in reality, it is only who they have practiced being. Patterns create the illusion of permanence. When you become aware of them, that illusion weakens. You start seeing how your thoughts often echo the same narratives. You notice how your emotions tend to orbit around familiar states like stress, frustration, or self doubt. Observe how your actions replay routines chosen not from intention but from habit. The moment you recognize these patterns, you begin to see that they are learned responses, not life sentences. Patterns persist because they are uncomfortable. There is a strange safety in the familiar pain of the past. The brain and body crave what they know, even if what they know is limiting. This is why change often feels challenging. It isn't because you are incapable of change, because your old patterns cling to you for survival. They want repetition. They want predictability. They want to keep you thinking, feeling, and acting in the same way because that is what keeps them alive. When you understand this, stop mistaking resistance for truth. Resistance simply means you are stepping into the unknown, and the unknown is where new patterns begin. You aren't hardwired to repeat your past. You are conditioned to repeat your past. And conditioning can be undone. The brain can old neural pathways and create new ones. The body can unlearn stored emotional memories and adapt to elevated states. Your habits can shift as soon as you choose a new intention and reinforce it consistently. Every moment offers you the chance to interrupt an old pattern and initiate a new one. Every decision becomes an act of rewiring. Every intentional thought becomes a blueprint for a new identity. When you embrace the truth that you are pattern driven, you break the illusion that change is impossible. You recognize that who you are today is simply the result of what you practiced yesterday. And who you become tomorrow depends entirely on what you choose to practice now. Future self is not something you stumble into by accident, nor is it a distant version of you waiting on the horizon of time. Your future self begins the moment you choose to think, feel, act in alignment with the life you desire rather than the life you remember. Most people believe that change is a product of time. Give it a week, a month, a year, and things will improve. But time alone doesn't bring transformation. Consciousness does. Intention does. Presence does. What you practice in this moment becomes the blueprint for the you that emerges in the moments that follow. In other words, your future isn't created by the calendar. It's created by the choices you make right now. Every present moment carries an extraordinary power, yet most people overlook it because they're too busy replaying the past or anticipating the future. When you dwell on past mistakes, old wins, or familiar patterns, you are borrowing your identity from memory. When you project fear, worry, or scarcity into the future, you are creating expectations based on the emotions of the past. In both cases, the present moment gets hijacked. And when the present moment is lost, future becomes nothing more than a recycled extension of yesterday. But when you become fully present, truly aware of what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what you're choosing, you interrupt the cycle that binds you to who you have been. Future self begins whenever you decide to break free from automatic reactions and step into conscious creation. This means not waiting for circumstances to change before you feel empowered, grateful, worthy, peaceful, or inspired. Instead, you generate those emotions now, long before anything in your external reality gives you permission. When you embody the emotions of your desired future in the present moment, you signal to your brain and body that the future has already begun. You are no longer chasing a new life, you are living it in advance. And the body, which responds to emotion more than logic, begins to adapt. It recalibrates your chemistry, shifts your energy, prepares you for a reality that matches the new internal state you are practicing. To create your future self now, you must first become conscious of who you no longer want to be. This awareness gives you the clarity to choose differently. When you feel the familiar pull of an old emotion like irritation, doubt, or fear, you can pause and recognize that it belongs to the old version of you. Then instead of indulging it, you can choose the emotion that lines up with your future. It is not about suppressing feelings, it is about replacing them with ones that better reflect the person you are becoming. The more you do this, the more your body comes to expect elevated emotions rather than repeat the emotions conditioned by your past. The present moment also invites you to act differently, not just feel differently. Identity is shaped by action. Every time you behave in a way that aligns with your future self, whether it's showing kindness, taking responsibility, pursuing a goal, embracing discipline, you reinforce the new identity you're cultivating. These actions, performed consistently, begin to overshadow the habits of your old self. The present moment becomes the laboratory in which your future self is built through small, deliberate, repeated choices. When you realize that your future self is not waiting for external change, but internal alignment, you stop delaying your transformation. You no longer say, "Start when I feel ready," or "I'll change when the circumstances are right." The circumstances become right when you align your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with the life you want. The readiness comes the moment you commit to being the person who lives that life. The present moment is your access point to infinite possibility. It is the place where the old self dissolves and the new self emerges. Your future doesn't start next year, next month, or tomorrow morning. It begins the moment you choose to step into a new state of being right here, right now. Emotions are the deep currents that shape who you believe yourself to be. They are not simply reactions to life. They are signals that instruct your body and mind on how to interpret the world and your place within it. Most people assume their emotions are automatic responses caused by circumstances, but the truth is that emotions are deeply intertwined with thought patterns, memories, and subconscious conditioning. Over time, repeated emotions become so familiar that they form the very foundation of identity. If you wake up every day feeling stressed, you begin to identify as a stressed person. If you frequently feel unworthy, your mind begins to sculpt an identity that reflects that unworthiness. Emotions practiced consistently become personality traits, and personality traits shape the life you experience. When you understand the power emotions hold over your identity, you begin to see how deeply they influence your perception, your choices, and your future. Every emotion carries a specific signature. Elevated emotions like joy, gratitude, inspiration, empowerment expand your awareness and open the door to higher levels of possibility. Contracted emotions like fear, shame, anger, and doubt narrow your perception and tether you to the familiar past. When the body memorizes certain emotional states, it expects them, seeks them, and even creates situations to reinforce them. This is why people often find themselves reliving the same emotional landscape year after year, despite their desire to change. It's not the external world keeping them stuck. Their emotional identity. Emotional patterns are powerful because they are stored both in the mind and in the body. A single thought can trigger an emotion, and that emotion can reinforce the thought, creating a loop that feels almost impossible to break. For example, a thought like, "I'm not capable," produces an emotion of insecurity. That emotion, once felt, makes the thought feel true, which strengthens the emotional state even further. Before long, the person is not just experiencing insecurity, they are becoming someone who sees themselves as insecure. This is how emotions sculpt identity. They are not fleeting sensations. They are the building blocks of who you allow yourself to be. To break the habit of being yourself, become aware of the emotional states you have rehearsed into your personality. This requires honesty, not judgment. You must be willing to observe which emotions dominate your daily experience. Do you live more in the realm of stress or peace? Do you spend more time feeling resentment or gratitude?
Yeah.
Do your emotions uplift you or drain you? Whatever emotional states you revisit repeatedly are the ones that form your baseline identity. And that baseline quietly influences every thought you think, every action you take, and every decision you make. The transformation begins when you realize that emotions are choices, not inevitabilities. You can choose to cultivate elevated emotions even before your external reality gives you a reason to feel them. When you generate gratitude without waiting for something to happen, you begin to teach your body that it can feel whole before anything changes. When you practice feeling inspired, loved, and empowered, even in the absence of external triggers, you begin to rewrite the emotional signature of your identity. Your body, conditioned for years by the emotions of the past, must adapt to this new internal environment. It may resist at first, attempting to pull you back into familiar emotional territory. With practice, the new emotions become more natural, more comfortable, and eventually more consistent. As your emotional state shifts, everything else shifts with it. Your thoughts become more aligned with possibility. Your actions become more intentional and courageous. Your perception widens, allowing you to see opportunities where before you only saw obstacles. The identity that once felt fixed begins to soften and reshape itself around the elevated emotions you practice. No longer defined by the emotional residue of your past, you begin to embody a personality that reflects the future you are stepping into. When you embrace the truth that emotions create identity, you gain the power to consciously sculpt the person you want to become, shaping your inner world so your outer world can rise to meet it. Your thoughts are not insignificant mental chatter, they are the architects of your future experiences. Every thought you entertain carries an energy, an intention, and a direction. It shapes the way you perceive the world, influences the emotions you feel, and guides the actions you take. People underestimate the magnitude of their thoughts because thoughts seem intangible, fleeting, and private. But in truth, they are the first building blocks of your reality. Before any change occurs in your external world, first take form in the internal world of your mind. The way you think today becomes the environment you step into tomorrow. Thoughts operate like a rehearsal. When you think the same thought repeatedly, your brain begins to hardwire it. Consistent thoughts create neural pathways, and neural pathways become mental habits. This is how thinking shapes identity, and identity shapes destiny. A person who constantly thinks, I never get things right, begins to filter life through that belief. They act more cautiously, take fewer risks, and notice every mistake more vividly because the mind is always seeking to confirm what it already believes. In the same way, someone who thinks, I always find a way, naturally becomes more resilient, more solution-oriented, and more open to opportunities. Thoughts generate the perspective through which you navigate life, and perspective determines outcome. Yet most people are not thinking consciously. They are reliving the same thoughts they had the day before, week before, and the year before that. Studies show that the majority of our daily thoughts are recycled. This means that unless you deliberately interrupt your thinking patterns, you are not creating anything new. You are reinforcing the past. You are waking up each day with a mind that automatically pulls you into old narratives, old limitations, and old expectations. This is why people often feel stuck even when they are trying to move forward. Their actions may be aimed at the future. Their thoughts are anchored in the past. If you want to design a new future, you must begin by becoming aware of your habitual thoughts. Awareness allows you to distinguish between the thoughts that empower you and the ones that diminish you. When you catch yourself thinking in ways that contradict the future you desire, thoughts of doubt, fear, lack, or limitation, you gain the opportunity to redirect them. This redirection is not about forcing positivity or denying reality, about choosing thoughts that reflect the identity you want to embody rather than the identity you are trying to outgrow. Thought selection is identity creation. Every time you choose a new thought, you are laying new tile in the foundation of your future self. Deliberate thinking also brings coherence between the mind and the emotions that follow. A thought like, I am capable of change, naturally generates emotions of confidence and empowerment. Like, nothing ever works out for me, produces emotions of defeat and discouragement. Emotions cannot exist independently. They are birthed by the thoughts that precede them. When your thoughts focus on possibility, your emotions expand. When your thoughts cling to limitation, your emotions contract. The emotional state you live in becomes the climate for your decisions, and your decisions determine your future. This is why thoughts matter so deeply. They are the origin point of everything that follows. The brain is not a passive observer in this process. It responds to your thoughts as if they were instructions. When you consistently think about your goals, your mind begins organizing itself toward them. When you imagine new possibilities, you activate neural circuits that support those possibilities. The brain doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality. It simply responds to what you repeatedly focus on. This means that when you think intentionally, you are literally training your brain to expect and create a future that aligns with those thoughts. You are engineering yourself for transformation from the inside out. As you begin to shift your thinking patterns, you create a mental environment that supports growth rather than constraint. You stop feeding the narratives that anchor you to old versions of yourself. Instead, you cultivate thoughts that elevate your perspective, expand your creativity, reinforce your resilience. These thoughts form a blueprint, a mental map for the person you are becoming. They set the stage for new emotions, new actions, and eventually new outcomes. When your thoughts consistently reflect the life you want to live, your external world begins to reorganize itself around that vision. Breaking the loop of yesterday is one of the most important steps in transforming your life because yesterday holds tremendous power over those who live unconsciously. Patterns of the past can be so deeply ingrained that they feel like destiny, but they are not. They are simply the result of repetition, repeated thoughts, repeated emotions, repeated reactions, repeated behaviors that have accumulated over time to form the illusion of an unchangeable identity. When you begin to look closely, you'll see that what you call your personality is often just the permission you've given yesterday to dictate today. The moment you become aware of this, you also become capable of breaking the cycle. The loop of yesterday operates in subtle ways. It begins the moment you wake up. Many people open their eyes and immediately recall their problems, their routines, obligations, and their unresolved emotions. In doing so, they plug themselves right back into the emotional signature of the past. The mind predicts what the day will hold based on memory, and the body follows with familiar emotions like stress, worry, frustration, or boredom. From this state, people respond to life as the person they were yesterday, not the person they want to become today. They carry their history into the present moment. Present moment becomes nothing more than an extension of what has always been. To break this loop, you must first recognize how deeply the past tries to insert itself into the present. The brain is naturally wired to seek what it knows. Even when what it knows is limiting, it loves predictability because predictability feels safe. The body, too, becomes conditioned to expect certain emotional states, and when those emotions don't show up, the body often triggers thoughts that will recreate them. Is how people stay stuck in cycles of anxiety, resentment, or self-doubt. They are not consciously choosing these states. They are simply replaying emotional memories. The past is not happening anymore, but the body relives it as though it is. Breaking the loop of yesterday requires disrupting this automatic process and reclaiming the present moment as a place of creation rather than repetition. This begins with awareness. When you wake up and notice your mind reaching for old problems or old emotions, you have a choice. Instead of allowing those familiar thoughts to run unchecked, you can pause, breathe, and consciously redirect your focus. You can choose thoughts that reflect who you want to be, not who you were. You can generate emotions that align with your future rather than your past. Even small moments of interruption become cracks in the foundation of yesterday's influence. One of the most powerful ways to escape the loop is to stop defining yourself by your memories. Your memories describe where you've been, not where you are going. When you repeatedly tell yourself the stories of your past, your mistakes, your traumas, your failures, your regrets, you anchor yourself to an outdated version of you. These stories become emotional anchors, and emotional anchors keep you from rising. To break the loop, you must let the past become information, not identity. You must allow yourself to become someone who is no longer obligated to repeat old emotional experiences simply because they are familiar. Breaking the loop also means making new choices, even when those choices feel uncomfortable. Unfamiliar often feels unsettling because it challenges the brain and body to operate in new ways. But the unfamiliar is where transformation begins. Every time you choose differently, responding with calm instead of irritation, courage instead of fear, Or optimism instead of resignation, you disrupt the internal chemistry of the old self. You begin signaling to your mind and body that a new identity is forming. And with each repetition of new choices, the grip of yesterday weakens. Continue breaking the loop. You become more aware of how your past once dictated your present. You notice how predictable your reactions used to be, how tightly you clung to certain emotions, and how automatically you repeated behaviors that didn't serve you. Awareness gives you freedom. It allows you to step into the present moment with a sense of possibility rather than predictability. The present becomes a canvas rather than a mirror of yesterday. You begin to feel the energy of your future more strongly than the weight of your past, and the cycle that once constrained you dissolves as you move into a new state of being. Living as the person you want to become is the embodiment stage of transformation. Moment when change stops being an idea you think about and becomes a state of being you practice. Many people have dreams, desires, and visions for their future, but they continue to behave as the version of themselves shaped by past experiences. They wait for external circumstances to validate their inner shift. They want success before they feel confident, love before they feel worthy, opportunity before they take action. But true transformation requires the opposite. Become the person internally before the external world can reflect that identity back to you. Living as the person you want to become means stepping into the mindset, emotions, and behaviors of your future self long before that future becomes visible. You cannot create new life with the emotional and mental patterns of an old one. If your future self is confident, you must begin generating confidence now, even if your circumstances have not yet changed. If your future self is calm, disciplined, creative, compassionate, you must begin practicing those qualities now. The brain and body respond to repetition, and with consistent practice, they begin to accept the new state as normal. When you align how you think, feel, and act with the identity you desire, you begin signaling to your entire system that transformation is happening in the present moment, not someday in the future. Living as your future self also requires letting go of the tendency to measure your progress through external results alone. Results come after identity shifts, not before. If you constantly check your environment for evidence that your transformation is working, you are still living from the old self, the self that depends on the external world to determine what is possible. The new self, however, acts from internal alignment. It no longer waits for proof, it becomes the proof. When you begin embodying the elevated states associated with your future, gratitude, worthiness, inspiration, empowerment, you are no longer operating from lack. You are operating from fullness. And fullness creates momentum. This practice of living as your future self invites you to make different choices. And these choices reshape your reality. Instead of reacting emotionally to familiar triggers, respond with the stability in your new identity. Instead of retreating into old habits of procrastination or doubt, you take deliberate steps forward. Instead of clinging to the comfort of what is known, you lean into the unfamiliar with curiosity and courage. Choices may feel small in the moment, but they accumulate. Each one reinforces the identity you are building until the new self feels more authentic than the old patterns you once relied on. Living as the person you want to become also means monitoring your internal dialogue. The way you speak to yourself determines the limits of your transformation. The future self you envision does not belittle doubt or sabotage your progress. It speaks with clarity, compassion, and conviction. When you shift your inner narrative to match your future identity, you stop feeding the mental loops that hold you back. Instead, you nourish thoughts that elevate your perception, strengthen your resilience, and anchor your vision. Key part of embodying your future self is practicing emotional sovereignty. Your emotions should be guided by who you are becoming, not by the circumstances around you. The moment you allow your external environment to dictate your emotional state, you step back into the old self, the self that reacts instead of creates. But when you maintain elevated emotions despite external challenges, you demonstrate mastery. You show yourself that you are no longer governed by the familiar emotions of the past, by the empowering emotions of your future. This level of emotional consistency is what makes transformation sustainable. As you continue to live as your future self, something remarkable happens. Your environment begins to shift in response to internal changes. Opportunities arise that match your new level of consciousness. Relationships evolve or fall away based on your updated emotional frequency. You begin attracting circumstances, people, outcomes that resonate with the identity you are embodying. This is not magic, it is alignment. When your internal world changes, your external world cannot stay the same. Living as the person you want to become is a commitment to continuous embodiment, a daily choice to align your thoughts, emotions, and actions with the reality you are creating. It is the most powerful declaration you can make that you are no longer defined by who you were, but by who you choose to be now. You now stand at the edge of possibility, holding the understanding that transformation isn't something that happens to you. It is something you choose with every thought, every emotion, and every action. You've seen how awareness can free you, how patterns can be rewritten, how the present moment can shape your future, and how elevated states of being can sculpt a new identity. You've learned that the past is not your blueprint and that the future begins with the choices you make right now. Knowledge alone is not enough. It is the daily practice that turns understanding into embodiment. Every day offers you a chance to step into the identity you are creating. Every moment gives you the opportunity to interrupt the familiar self and choose the elevated one. And every time you align your inner state with the person you want to become, you bring that future closer to you. This is your invitation to live consciously, intentionally, and to live courageously, not by waiting for change to arrive, but by becoming the source of that change. Let your thoughts lead you. Let your emotions empower you. Let your choices reflect the life you desire. Your new self is not somewhere ahead of you. It is already within you, ready to be practiced into reality.